when I told myself I couldn't draw or I couldn't paint or I couldn't do art, then I couldn't. But when I told myself I could, all of a sudden I could.
Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Art Journey Podcast, the podcast where we share artist stories and discuss popular art topics to help you on your own path. My name is Alex Agosto, and I'm so excited to be here today. So, I don't know about you guys, but like January always gets me so hyped. You know, this feeling of like just the opportunity to start fresh and start things over and really get to work on the things that I need to do. So, just like every other person in America, I watched Marie Kondo's new Tidying Up show on Netflix, and oh my god, it really motivated me to just kind of start tidying up stuff in my apartment, getting rid of stuff that I don't need, and really narrowing down my stuff to things that I truly love and need and appreciate. And it's been amazing. I finally let go of a lot of stuff I've been carrying with me for years. I finally let go of a lot of my really old supplies from when I was a jewelry design major, which, as you may or may not know, I'm not pursuing jewelry design and I don't see myself pursuing it anytime soon. So it was kind of hard because I had a lot of memories tied to some of that stuff, but it was time. And I kept the stuff that really meant a lot to me. And yeah, it just feels good to start fresh. Another cool thing I've been doing is I've been painting regularly, which I have not done in forever. And honestly, it's been feeling really good. And I've been producing stuff that I really like. And I'm excited to share on my Instagram real soon. But let's move on to our guest today. I know that's what we're all here for, right? So today I have a guest who has a really unique business. Her name is Kolbie Blume. You might know her around the internet as Thiswritingdesk. And she's a hand lettering artist, which is a first for the show, which is really cool. But her business is really unique because her art combines watercolor painting and hand lettering, but she also offers help for people who run businesses. So she'll create posts for businesses to use on their social media, but she also does a little bit of consulting for people who want to grow their social media, particularly, entrepreneurs and artists. And she also offers some services to help businesses with like their pieces of writing for business. If you own a business, you should know that aside from, taking pictures of products and actually creating art, a big part of it is writing, copy, and language for your website and your products. And she offers a little bit of that too. So I don't know. It's really cool. I've never heard of a business like this, and she can tell you way more about it than I could ever do. So I will stop rambling per usual. And come on, guys, let's give a big warm welcome to Kolbie Blume, aka Thiswritingdesk. How are you doing today, Kolbie?
I'm doing well, Alex. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on the show today. You are the first artist of your kind. You're very unique. You do both watercolor illustration, but you also do hand lettering, and that's a first on the podcast.
Oh, well, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you for coming onto the show. So, one of the first questions I love to ask everyone is, when you were little, were you into art? I feel like most artists, the answer is yes, but were you really into art when you were little, like drawing and coloring and stuff like that?
That is something that's really funny about me. I thought I was terrible at art. I thought I
Really?
was terrible. Yes. I remember liking it when I was like very young, maybe 6 or 7, and I always loved reading, and I loved reading illustrated books, like children's books,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it'd be cool to be an author slash illustrator. But by the time I hit maybe third or fourth grade, I kind of gave up on it, and didn't, I didn't even really do art again until I was in my 20s. So
Wow.
I know it's kind of crazy, actually.
That's really interesting. That's actually I feel like most people who end up in art always had kind of a linear-ish journey and where art was always present. So it's really interesting to hear that you kind of abandoned it for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was always doing creative things. Creativity has always been part of my identity, my what I did during my life. I am a musician. I play the piano and I sing. I did theater in high school and a little bit of college, and I also love to write. I majored in English, so I was never far away from the art. I just kind of
Yeah.
hovered around it, but that's kind of a really cool part of my art journey, for me, is I always thought I couldn't do it until I I was working at a job a few years ago, and during
Mhm.
my lunch breaks, on I would just like be browsing Instagram, and I was so mesmerized by these hand lettering videos that I would see on Instagram. This was maybe like 2014, 2015, something
Yeah.
similar around there. And I remember watching those videos and thinking to myself, man, I really wish that I could do that. I wish that was a talent that I had. And because I had just completely written off art as a talent, I wasn't sad about it. I was just kind of like, oh man, yeah, I just don't have that skill. I wish that I did.
Mhm.
And at some point, after watching those videos, the wish kind of morphed into, well, why can't I do that? I bet I could try.
Yeah.
And so I bought some brush pens and I tried and I couldn't stop practicing. And after about maybe 8 months of doing just the hand lettering thing, because even doing the hand lettering thing, I thought to myself, well, that doesn't make me like a real artist, though. I could never do like landscapes, which is ridiculous because obviously you're not just a hand letterer, right? If you do calligraphy or anything like that, you're obviously doing art. And
Mhm.
but in my mindset, I was somebody who couldn't do art, so it was like I was faking it almost.
Yeah.
But then like 8 months into it, I wanted to try to come up with like backgrounds for the quotes that I would do, and so I tried watercolor, and it was like love at first sight. And honestly, all it took was me, I mean, not all it took hours and hours of
Yeah.
practice, but the mindset shift of me going from, oh, I can't do that, to, well, maybe I can if I tried, was like the big momentum shift for me, where I went from being somebody who doesn't do art, can't do art, to it's my job now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's really cool. And so something that a lot of people, maybe not artists, but I feel like a lot of non-artsy folk think hand lettering is just writing very pretty. But, hand lettering is akin to drawing. If
Yeah.
anything, hand lettering is closer to drawing than just, handwriting.
Oh yeah, and actually there's the difference between, not a lot of people know this because, well, I'm sure some people know this, but I looked this up once because the kind of like modern calligraphy style that I first started doing with the brush pens and everything like that,
Mhm.
everybody called it hand lettering. But I heard one time that the definition of hand lettering is when you're actually drawing the letters, right? And calligraphy is when the lettering style that you're using is where the downstrokes are thick and the upstrokes are thin. And so a lot of, if like any hand letterer out there knows that sometimes it takes you hours to put together a piece because you're drawing out the space and the composition of
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're doing. And yeah, it's definitely art. So when I thought to myself after working hours and hours that I wasn't a real artist, that was just
Yeah.
me being dumb.
Well, honestly, it's not, it really isn't being that, you don't feel silly for that, because sometimes there are people who do traditional art, but because they do it as a hobby, they think, oh, I'm not a real artist.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's funny that you say that, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that have shared the same mindset that you had.
Yeah, I'm sure. I run into a lot of them actually. When I tell people what I do, they're always like, "Oh wow, that is so cool. I could never do that." And I just want to like slap them upside the head sometimes, because
Yeah.
that was the reason that I never did art for so many years, is because I thought, "Oh, well, I could never do that though. Like that's not something that I could do." And I really think that the only thing that was stopping me from doing it was me. So,
Which I feel like that's just the case in almost everything in our lives, right?
yeah.
Whenever we're like, "Oh, I wish I could do that," or I could never do this. 9 times out of 10, the only obstacle is you.
Yeah.
And
It
that's a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast. A lot of people listening are people who want to be artists for a living,
yeah.
who I feel like the only reason they're not doing it is because they don't believe in themselves. And, I want them to hear people like you, who you sound like you went your whole life thinking you weren't an artist, and that was the one thing holding you back from doing it for a living.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I definitely, for any of anybody listening who believes that, like, who wants to be an artist, or even if it's not art, if they have dreams that they want to pursue but they just feel like it's not in the cards for them. Opportunity is always, you can't get far without some kind of luck and opportunity, but it's just as important is hard work, but also the having an attitude that is positive, having a, like, I hate to say, like, can do spirit, but
Mhm.
I really, I know from personal experience that I couldn't draw or I couldn't paint or I couldn't do art, then I couldn't. But when I told myself I could, all of a sudden I could. And it's not like the very first time I tried it, it was, I'm not just like an overnight Monet or something, but it definitely took the hours and the work to get better, and I keep trying to get better every day. Um but when I looked at the art that I did after telling myself, you know what, maybe I can, it went from, oh, well, I wouldn't even show this to a fourth grader kind of thing, to, wow, I made
Mhm.
something pretty. This is beautiful. I would show
Yeah.
this off to people. Um, and so the first step is 100% believing that you can do it. That's always the first step.
I completely agree, and you're echoing a lot of things that some of the guests that have been on the podcast have said.
Yeah.
You know, a big part of being an artist is, it's funny because artists have this rap for, like, creating art out of pain, and it's kind of a detrimental stereotype, because I feel like more important than not, more often than not, it's more important for you to have a positive outlook, because you need to have that drive to keep going, to keep creating, and to keep getting better. And it's so hard to do that when you don't believe in
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of art, and in my experience, and even in other mediums of creativity, because like I said, I do music and writing and other things as well. Emotion is really key. Is tapping into like real emotion and things that you feel in everyday life,
Mhm.
um, but art doesn't necessarily have to stem from like the deepest, darkest parts of your soul. It is, yeah,
Exactly.
it's not like, I think it's also important to remember too that it's not like famous artists just one day had all of this emotion well up inside of them and spat it out on a canvas, and then were selling their paintings for millions of dollars. Like it takes finessing, and it takes just as much creativity and like chaos, I guess. And I know about like watercolor is
Mm-hmm.
my medium, and watercolor is definitely one of the harder kind of paints to control. But that's what I like so much about it, because it's a combination of, letting passion and creativity and the raw emotion that you're feeling come out, but then also like understanding that, okay, I'm also gonna guide this and to make it into something that
Mm-hmm.
everybody else can understand too. And so it's a combination of, in terms of emotion, I think it's always a combination of having your emotion, but then also having like the reason and logic behind it to mesh it together to make it so it's even more impactful. I don't know if that makes sense or if that was off topic, but
No, it completely makes sense. It's funny because I'm also largely a watercolor illustrator, and I can relate to that feeling of, watercolors kind of have a mind
yeah.
of its own, and it kind of teaches you that sometimes you have to let your art be
Hmm.
what it is, and you can definitely guide it, but you have to let it be. And I feel like that's such a good analogy for artists as people. Like, um you have, yes, let yourself feel everything you're feeling. Like, a lot of great artists have made their art out of pain and, hardship, but don't let yourself believe that in order to create good art you have to be in pain, because you really need that positive spirit to
Yeah.
keep you going. And even if you're not naturally a positive person, just making the effort to look at the brighter outlook on life will take you far, because being in a creative field, especially when you're independent, it's not the easy route. And you don't want to make it even harder for yourself by being pessimistic about it,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I I mean, that just ties back to what I was saying about telling the difference between telling yourself, "No, there's no way that I could do that," and yeah, actually, I think that I can, even if it's not going to be perfect. I can. I think that
Mhm.
there's definitely a way to, you know, be in pain and feel the pain and realities of life, because there are many. And
Of
even for
course.
people who look like they have it all, or who look like they're, just living the dream and rolling in just getting all of the jobs and living life to its fullest, everybody still experiences pain and insecurity and doubt. But um like learning to live with that, as well as understand that you can still be positive and you can still take a step forward every day, um, and move toward your dream at the same time, I think has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, and I can totally see how that mental shift could really help you kind of break through into
Yeah.
that career. And so I was, when I asked you to be on the podcast, I, did a little bit of research. I looked up your website and stuff. And honestly, your business is so unique. So, if you want to tell people what you do, I know that you do hand lettering, you do painting, and you do writing. So, do you want to tell people about your
Yeah, yeah,
business?
definitely. So first, let me give just a little bit of background on like what I pursued as a career beforehand. So I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
always a freelance artist slash writer. As I mentioned earlier in this podcast, I majored in English in college, and communication has always been like my niche area. And before I decided to go freelance, I was doing PR and communications for a nonprofit. Um, and I was also
Wow.
like, part of that was some speech writing, some social media. And while I was doing that, on the side, I opened a little Etsy shop, and I was growing my little, at the time, my little Instagram, my little art Instagram. And so while I was learning a lot about public relations and about growing engagement on social media and communications at my nonprofit job, I was also using that, but also some of my own thoughts and prior thoughts about communication to help grow my art Instagram account, to help grow my business. And while I was at that job, I thought, there's no way that I could ever like quit my job. I'm not that person to quit my job and pursue my own thing full time. I've just never been that person. And I had so many people ask me, are you going to be one of those people one of those Etsy shop owners who quits their day job and, becomes a maker full time? And my answer was always, no way. And I just laughed in their face. And it's so funny because my whole life I've just been resisting everything that's ever been good. But and then like one day, after so long thinking to myself, I'm never going to be that person, I again had a little voice in my head say like, well, why not? What happened? Like, what if you did do that? Would you like it? Because I just found myself thinking about art and becoming a freelancer, and like just thinking about that stuff all the time. I could not stop thinking about it, and it made a job that I liked hard to be at because I was thinking about this other thing so often. And so anyway, long story short, after months and months of researching and going back and forth and wondering if I should do it, I quit my job a few months ago, and I'm doing my business full time now. And so knowing that and knowing my background, I wanted to combine all of these things that I loved. So obviously, because the reason I'm on this podcast is because of the hand lettering and illustrating and stuff like that. I love watercolor. I love words, and I love meshing art with words as much as possible, because I think that not only having like the written representation of an idea, but combining it with a visual representation is just such a powerful way to communicate. And so that's something that I really wanted to express to future clients, that I really want to help, whatever idea that you want to get across or whatever idea that you have in mind, I want to try to bring it to life in multiple ways. So whether that's going the traditional route of just having a client say, I want you to paint this, or I want you to hand letter this quote, doing it that way, or if I combine my creative writing skills to help the words come together in addition to the art side of it, that's something I'm really interested too. I'm also, this is a lot, but there's just a lot that I'm interested in, and it's particularly as I took what I learned about communications and social media and PR and stuff in the nonprofit sector, and then started to apply it to my own Instagram account. In the past year, I just had noticed a lot of increased engagement on my part when I implemented certain things or paid more attention to analytics or things like that. And so I also would love to work with creative entrepreneurs and business owners who are interested in growing their social media and building their engagement. And that's whether that's through like working with me to help them create custom illustrations or custom social media posts that they can use to build their social media, or working with me in consultation to help strategize. I guess kind of like a coach. I don't want to say like business coaching per se, because I feel like I'm not quite there yet, but definitely as like a social media consultant, that's something that I do. So anyway, that's kind of, and whether that's, my services are geared toward businesses, which mostly I feel like it's geared toward businesses, but also for weddings or any other kind of event where you need advertising in the form of words and art. That's I'm here for you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's such a cool concept. I haven't really seen it before, and it just makes so much sense, especially particularly the part of like where you're making illustration and hand lettering posts
Hmm.
for businesses. Like I would have never thought to turn a hand lettering ability into that. Like I just thought it was
Yeah.
so cool, and it makes so much sense because in in its rawest form, hand lettering is words, and words are used for communication. And what better way to use that than in a business that's trying to communicate their
Yeah,
message?
I hadn't really seen a whole lot of it either, which is why I was thinking more and more about it as I was starting to go full time, and how I wanted to pitch myself to businesses. Mostly because, I'm on Instagram all the time, not just because of my own Instagram, but I feel like that's a lot of where advertising happens now, right? I think
It
because
is
people
true.
spend so much of their time on social media, and so if a business, especially a retail business or somebody who wants to reach a specific audience, isn't actively working to engage that specific audience on social media, um, it's just such a lost opportunity. And as I was noticing the little differences or tweaks that I would make that would draw people to my own account, not that it would, obviously, not that it would directly translate, because my account, obviously draws potential artists or people who are interested in learning
Mhm.
my craft. But um, just trying to take lessons that I learned from that and applying it to businesses that I would notice who maybe have tons of followers but not very good engagement. Um, I I just thought that maybe we could there was a potential to collaborate there to help, um, you know both parties, and so that's definitely
Yeah.
something I'm pursuing. Hmm.
Yeah, and again, and the thing that is also really cool is that your business kind of embodies what like a basic form of that advice that's given to independent artists, where you should be trying to broaden your streams of income as much
Hmm.
as you can. Like not all your eggs are in one basket. And if anything, your business has such diverse sections to it that I just think it's such a smart business move, because you always have something going for you. If, let's say, your consulting's going weak, you're still doing work for businesses, you're still doing work for individuals. You have more than one thing
Yeah.
going on at once, and I think you
I
teach as
do,
well, right?
yes. I have several classes on the online community Skillshare, which I can't. If anybody looking to grow their skills hasn't come across Skillshare, I can't recommend it enough. It's a very affordable learning community, and I have 8 or 9 classes on there. They're all about an
Wow.
hour and a half, where you paint with me, where I'll paint some kind of scene, and I'll show you all the materials that you'll need. And there are maybe like 10 little videos that are 6 or 7 minutes a piece, and show you all the steps to paint a lot of the scenes that are on my Instagram account. So a
Hmm.
lot of people like that. A lot of my followers really like my Skillshare classes. And I also do in-person workshops where I live in Washington, D.C. Um, so I've
Hmm.
really enjoyed teaching as well.
Yeah, and that's really cool also for the art community, to not keep your talents and your skills to yourself. It's so nice to have, teach them and pass them along to
Hmm.
more people, because there's always this misconception of like you have to keep all your secrets to yourself, all the little tips and tricks that you learn in art, because it's what sets you apart. But there's room for everyone in the industry, you know? And by sharing your knowledge with someone else, you're not cutting your chances at, you know, growing your business. You're just helping someone else grow, and in turn, the more people you help, that always comes back to you in one
Oh
way or
yeah, I
another.
absolutely believe that. I also believe I'm a very firm believer that there's really no such thing as like an entirely original piece of art. I think that every artist takes inspiration from what they see around them, and instead of shying away from that and trying to shield your art from other people, which is kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to
True.
be open and honest about the fact that, yeah, it's not like I, dreamt up all of these techniques and came up with every inspired piece by myself. It's a little bit of all of the different art that I've seen, and um, and I think that if I can help somebody gain the confidence to try and experiment themselves, um, then I'm doing my part in the community. Just like I'm so grateful for all the people who share their art and their techniques and helped me come up with my own and come up with my own style, which took some time, but um,
Mm-hmm.
then
It's
if I can
true.
help another person learn how to do that or more people, then it's definitely worthwhile. Um, so I think there's always the big debate on whether it's okay to copy or whether it's okay to,
Mm-hmm.
steal from another artist. And obviously, I wouldn't want somebody copying something that I've done directly and then trying to sell it, because I feel like everybody knows that that's kind of over the line, but I am so happy to share
Yeah.
the steps and my processes so that people can look at it and learn something new and, make.
And apply those teachings to
Yes,
their own
exactly.
stuff. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I agree with you also on the fact that Skillshare is amazing. I signed up for it years ago, still have my account, and I'm always finding stuff to learn on there, especially with
Yeah.
watercolor. Like, I feel like there's always someone out there doing something so cool with watercolor that I don't know how to do
That's
yet.
so true, and Skillshare is a great place to find those teachers. So,
Definitely. And so, going back a little bit, so you mentioned that you made the leap from your past job in communications to doing your own business full
yes,
time,
I
right?
did.
So, when did you know that it was a good time to do it? Because that is something a lot of people ask. They're like, I'm doing this business of mine on the side, but I'm just not sure when is the right time to do it. So, when did you personally feel it was the right time for you to move on to your
Oh,
own
that's such a
stuff?
tricky question, because I'm sure if you've talked to anybody who's made that leap, it's kind of like you really never know if it's a good time.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
the draw of a steady paycheck is hard to veer away from. But um
Oh, yeah.
all I the timeline for me, let's see. I think in December of last year, so about a year ago today, is when I first had the inkling of like, well, what if I did this? What if I could do this? And I ruminated on that thought for maybe 2 months before I actually let myself think that I could. And at that point, I started doing all the research that I could. I started listening to podcasts on creative entrepreneurs. I started looking at blogs. I started looking at articles on how to quote unquote make the leap. And
Mhm.
it's always so helpful to hear stories from other people. Um, and for me, I think it was always going to be scary, but when I first started thinking about it, I was like terrified and excited at the same time, and it felt right.
Yeah.
It didn't happen for me until the next September. So September of this year is when I quit my job. So December last year to September of this year was like my timeline of maybe I could do this to um actually doing it, and knowing that I had my Etsy shop for maybe like 6 or 7 months prior to. last December. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
this timeline might be super jumbled, but and I'm sorry I'm not getting right to the point.
No, that's fine. I feel like that is always a hard
Yeah.
question to answer because it is, especially time is such an abstract thing. I'm sure, like like you said, it's not usually a specific time that you feel like it's right. It's kind of builds up and then you just kind of
Yeah,
jump.
you just kind of jump. And for me, it felt more right and like I was more ready when I had in mind specifically what I wanted to do, and getting those clients
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel so much out of reach anymore. You had mentioned this
Yeah.
before, but definitely I found that a key element to being a successful freelancer is having multiple streams of revenue. So that if one, like you said, if one stream of my business kind of dries up for a few months, I can always focus on something else. And something that also was really helpful for me was to build up at least one form of passive revenue. So if I do
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot of work on the front end and then it just makes me money on the back end, that's something that's always helpful. And online classes have really helped with that for me. Um, I I launched my Skillshare channel in March of this year. Yeah,
Mm, okay.
and in March, since March, I have published one class every month, except for November. I missed
Ooh,
last
that's a
month, but
strategy.
um, I published one class every month, and um, it's while the revenue that I make from teaching those classes isn't enough to cover my whole paycheck for like definitely not. It was comforting for me to know that okay, once I put in the time to film this class, then I don't have to do much, like I just have to advertise after that and it will keep making me money. And so finding some kind of passive revenue stream um before I even decided to go freelance was really helpful for me. Now, whether or not that's the right move for other people deciding to go freelance, because passive revenue
Mhm.
streams aren't always easy to find or to
Yeah.
to carve out. It was something that helped kind of ease my stress of losing a stable paycheck, because I knew that at least there was something that was going to come in without me having to kill myself over it, if that makes sense. Um,
No, it completely
yeah.
makes sense. And that really is a good point. Passive income can be one of your best assets because you put in all the work, in at once up front, and then it just keeps making you money as long as you're making sure to
Yep.
advertise it,
Yeah.
right?
So having said all of those practical things, I also want to say at some point you just kind of have to jump. Because I don't know that there was ever a time where I was like, okay, I hit exactly the financial goal that I wanted to make. Um, it's gonna
Yeah.
happen now. I mean, my husband and I definitely talked about like, this is how much money I want saved to have some kind of buffer fund. I would recommend that, by the way, as another practical thing, to have
Mhm.
some kind of savings to fall back on, so that if in the first month you don't meet your financial goals, then it's not like you're just out of luck. Because it's going to take time to build up a business and to get used be used to working for yourself and to having freedom over your all of your time. It's definitely an adjustment. So it was nice for me to have that kind of buffer fund. But that said, I never felt like, okay, this is it. I'm 100% ready and I have zero fear. There was always a little bit of fear.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to have faith in yourself that, okay, I can do it. And even if in the first month or two that it turns out to be a little harder than you thought, you have to give it time and you have to believe in yourself. And once you do, and you're doing all of the things that you knew were going to work, and you're checking off the checklist and doing all the right things, then I really believe that good things will happen. They have for me. So
Yeah, feel like that's such a comforting thing to hear. I'm sure for the people out there listening who might be kind of on that teeter-totter of should I,
Hmm.
shouldn't I? Sometimes, like, just hearing that the people who did what you did were scared can help you be like, "Oh, okay, so this is
Yes.
normal." Like, especially like you said, I think it's important for people to understand that fear is not gonna go away. You have to do it
Yeah.
regardless of it, knowing that you
Yeah,
can do
I
it.
absolutely believe that. I think that people shouldn't be stupid. Like I do think that there are things that are important to be practical about. But so it takes
Mhm.
both. It takes like being practical about it, but then also at the end of the day, just saying, okay, if I've done everything I can at this point and I'm still scared, then I don't think that the fear is gonna go away. And
Yeah.
and something that I've really learned in the last few years of just being part of the art community and going from, being a person who has maybe 400 followers and looking at all of these, quote unquote famous people in the community who have like dozens or even
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of followers. um to go from looking at them like, wow, I wonder how I'll even get there, or I wonder what it's like to be like them, to flash forward to where I am now, where um, I I have a lot of people who are interested in watching my art, and all of a sudden, those people who I looked up to, I still look up to, but I realized like everybody who does art like this are just people. They're just trying to make it the same as me. And they're
Yeah.
scared too, and they get frustrated too, and sometimes they want to quit too. And but at the end of the day, it's figuring out what drives you and what makes you want to do it, and what makes it worth it. Because it's definitely not easy to work for yourself. It's you have to have your own motivation. If you want to make money, you're the one who has to motivate yourself to work. It's not like phoning it in at a day job and you can still make your paycheck, because that doesn't really happen for a freelancer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's very true. I feel like you have to be very, you have to be a
Yeah. Mhm.
self-starter. You need to know what fuels you enough to keep
Yeah.
you going.
I think that's true. And I also think that for that reason, it might not be for everybody. I believe that anybody can do it if they want to, if they have the drive and motivation.
Mhm.
But if you don't, like if you like art but enjoy it just as a side hustle, not even just as a side hustle, but would prefer that it's, the side hustle and you still go into a job every day and do that, live that life, that is totally fine too. I think it's you can be a successful creative and still have a day job. Um, it just kind of it depends on your preference. So
Yeah, and that's actually a really good thing to definitely highlight. Um, I f I feel like people should not feel obligated to turn their artistic ability into a
yeah,
living. You do not have to do that, and especially, like, don't think that you have to turn it into a living to be considered successful or
yeah,
good. It's if you don't want to do it for a living, you really, really don't have to, no matter how many people are like, "Oh, but you're an artist. You don't wanna work in art. You don't wanna, you're not gonna go do this full time." Don't let on the flip side, don't let yourself be pressured into doing it if you don't want to have, your life hinge on whether or not you're producing
yeah,
creative work. There is no shame in having a day job. I have a day job. I work for a retail website, but that doesn't stop me from knowing that I'm still an artist and I still introduce myself as an artist when people
yeah,
talk to me.
yeah. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to have art be your full time gig if you're a real professional artist. I think that if you are showing your art to the world, and uh and you're selling things and people are paying or giving their time in order to view your art, then that means you're a professional artist. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't go to art school, so maybe people who did go to art school might have something to say about that, but um I yeah, I think that you shouldn't let all of the different things that you do during the day stop you from believing in yourself and your art. Um, and I also know some people who quit their day jobs and then decided to go back to a day job because it's what they wanted to do. And I think that honestly, what it comes down to is doing some soul searching and trying things out and just making your like figuring it out. I don't know anybody. I feel like that's the biggest secret to being a grown up is that nobody really knows what they're doing. Everybody's just
That's so
kind of fumbling
true.
along in the dark and hoping that everything will work out.
That is so true. I'm in my mid 20s, and I remember thinking back when I was a senior in high school that people in their 20s were so grown up and they had it figured out. And I'm here and I'm like, and I remember mentioning that to my mom. My mom's like, dude, I'm 60 and I still don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I'm like, I wish
Uh,
somebody had told me this a
I
long
know,
time
right?
ago.
You think, oh, once you hit 25, then you're going to know exactly what you want from life. And all of a sudden, 25 comes and goes, and 26 comes along. I just turned 26, and I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. It seems to be the running theme. It's like everybody's biggest secret and
I
nobody talks
know.
about it. But yeah, every single adult you see out there has no
Yeah,
idea what they're
it's
doing,
true. They just kind of
which is
no, it
oddly
is. And I
comforting.
think that knowing that so many people are so successful but still have that mindset, um, it means that you can make it. It might not be
I
exactly the
know.
way that you planned, but one of my very favorite phrases, and I do not remember who coined this. I think it was somebody famous, but um, everything is figure outable. I heard that somewhere, and I think like
Yeah.
it does not imply that everything is perfect and everything can be perfectly planned out. It just means any problem that's in front of you, any challenge that's in front of you, any hardship that you are going through, you can get through it and be okay. You might not be like super rich or super famous, and you'll probably still have student loan debt, and you might not know where your next paycheck is coming from, but it will be okay if you just keep working hard and trying your best and making do with what you have, and then always looking toward the future and trying to just move forward even if it's just a little bit every day.
Definitely. I think that's such a good thing to touch on, especially as
Yeah.
a creative. And so, why don't we move on to there's this fun question I like to ask all guests kind of
Okay.
towards the end. So, we all love colors. You need to love color
Yes,
if you're an
yes you
artist.
do.
But what are some colors that you rarely get to use in your art, but you do
Oh, that
love?
is a great question. I love that question. I hardly ever touch my metallic paint, like my gold or my copper or paint
Ooh.
like that. And I don't know why because I really love how they look. But I guess for like my more currently my style I guess is like wilderness themed, like loose watercolor wilderness
Mhm.
themed. And I just for what I do now, I don't incorporate much metallic into it, but um I've been thinking about ways that I can incorporate it more. So that's definitely one thing. I would also say brown is a color that I don't always incorporate, which is funny because I paint a lot of trees, but I hardly ever paint them
I
brown.
was about to say that. I was about to say you paint a lot
Yeah,
of
but
trees.
I almost always paint them black or blue like Payne's gray. I hardly ever paint them brown, which
Yeah.
is funny, but
Yeah,
I
that's
know.
so interesting. And I guess to wrap things up, are there any thoughts you'd like to leave people with? Anything you want them to know about being a creative as a
Yeah,
professional?
just that it's okay that it's hard. I I follow the podcast and also the illustrator and DJ Pizza. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
Yeah, the creative
yes.
pep talk.
And he posted a quote that he took from his dad the other day that he like illustrated and hand lettered, and it was something along the lines of um hard and wrong are not the same thing, or hold on, I don't know if I can pull it up, but basically
Yeah, pull it up.
so on Andy J. Pizza's Instagram, he illustrated this quote from his dad, and it says, "Life is hard, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Hard and bad are not the same thing." And that was something that really resonated with me because, I don't think anybody ever really talks about this either, but when I was at my day job, I would just like fantasize about being able to spend all day painting and all day running my business, and how I would work so hard and I would always be motivated all the time. And then I quit my day job, and it was harder than I thought to be motivated,
Mm-hmm.
which is such an interesting thing because you would think that if this is the thing that I want to pursue, then I should be motivated to just do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to. I had the drive and the ambition, and I really wanted to. And sometimes it was just hard. And and so that was something that was hard to wrap my mind around, that something that I wanted and something that I dreamt about could also be hard. But when I saw that quote, I was just like, yes, you're right. It is hard. It's always going to be hard following your dream and trying to do the thing you always wanted to do is never going to be easy because you're growing. That's part of what life is, right? If you're going to follow your dream, it wouldn't be a dream if you just had it at the snap of a finger.
So true.
Yeah, you have to work at it, and working usually implies that something requires more energy than before, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. But that, just because something is hard and you're frustrated and maybe angry or confused, that doesn't mean that it's bad, and that doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong thing. It just means that life is hard and it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be hard no matter what you're doing, and I really believe that's true. I really think that if life isn't hard, then you're not working hard enough.
Yeah.
I yeah.
And
So,
like you said, it's going to be hard regardless. So wouldn't you prefer to be putting that time, energy, and frustration into something that you love instead of
yes.
putting that frustration and anger and all that into something that you don't like? Because then you're just piling on, frustration upon negativity instead of using it to your advantage to work towards your own dreams.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Everything you just said.
Oh, Colby, it was so good talking to you today. I'm just was so excited to talk to someone who had such an interesting business, and you turned things that would normally be so different in our heads, and you combine them to do one big awesome business. And I just think it's so cool. But for those of you out there who don't know her work, where can they find you?
Yes. So the easiest place to find me will be on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Thiswritingdesk. Fun fact, when I first started my Instagram account, way back in February 20 something, 15 or 16,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Somewhere over there. I wanted it to be the writing desk, like from Alice in Wonderland,
Oh
because
yeah.
as I've mentioned 3 times now, I think I majored in English, so literature is something that's like really important to me, and I always loved studying and writing about Alice in Wonderland. So I wanted it to be the writing desk, but it was taken by somebody who hadn't used Instagram in 3 years.
Oh my
So
god.
mad.
That's the
I know.
worst.
I know, it is the worst. And so I decided on this writing desk because I know that when you write out Instagram handles, you have to put the at sign. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought that, they might say to themselves, at this writing desk, like what I'm doing at this writing desk. But
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, so that's my Instagram. You can also find me on my Instagram. There's a link that will link to my Etsy shop and my website. But in case you want to go to my website without my Instagram to see all the stuff that I do for my business, you can find me at www.writingdeskcreativeco.com. Writing Desk Creative Co. is like my main business name.
Okay.
So,
Awesome. And then for those of you out there who want clickable links, those will be in the show notes here on the app and also on my website. But again, thank you so much, Kolbie, for your time and your insight and for sharing your story with us.
It was such a pleasure to be here, Alex. Thank you again.
Guys, I'm so happy I had the opportunity to meet Kolbie. You know, life brought us together in a really interesting way. Just like a couple of other guests on the show, I met her through Kathy Heller's community on Facebook from her podcast, Don't Keep Your Day Job. And that podcast, guys, you guys really have to give it a listen. It's provided a lot of inspiration for me. It's one of the main reasons this podcast even exists. And it's brought the opportunity for me to meet amazing people who are out there pursuing their dreams and just really going after it. So, that was my phone. Why don't we go over the 3 lessons that we can learn from Kolbie today, shall we? Number 1, the most important thing about being a good artist is believing that you can be a good artist. When Kolbie was growing up, she thought she was a terrible artist and she abandoned it for a long time. And it wasn't until she told herself that it was possible for her to be an artist, you know, that mentality of why can't it be me? Why not? That's when things really changed for her. She started practicing a lot. She started, you know, looking up tutorials and stuff. And now she is an amazing artist. And she probably was always a good artist. It's just that she didn't have the confidence to see it herself. Number 2, hand lettering is closer to drawing than it is to writing. One of the reasons I'm including this in here is because I know a lot of people say they would love to incorporate hand lettering into their artwork, but they say, oh, my handwriting is ugly, I can never do that. But hand lettering is so much closer to drawing that if you're an artist, it's probably going to be fairly easy for you to pick up, in the sense that you have an understanding of form and drawing principles, and you can apply that to learning. So if you really want to do that, why don't you just go look up some tutorials? Skillshare has some amazing ones, and YouTube has some too, and go teach yourself. It's completely possible, and it can transform your work. And number 3, the fear of making that leap to work as a freelance or independent artist, it never really 100% goes away. So what you need to do is focus on the logical stuff. You know, make sure you have your financials in order, get a nice savings cushion, things like that. Make sure that you have enough income coming in from your art that can realistically sustain you. Once you're sure that your art can sustain you through, you know, income and all of that, and you have your savings cushion, you have a rough idea of things like just the finances, the money that goes out, the money that comes in, then really think about why you're afraid, because it's okay for you to be afraid of the pragmatic stuff. You should be worried about getting that in order. But if your fear is not based in that, and your fear has to do with, like, is this really something I could do? I mean, God, just do it. Just do it. That fear's not going to go away. Most people that do the leap, they do the leap afraid. And so just know that if you have your finances in order and you have things like taxes pre-figured out and you're organized and it's been like that for months, then just close your eyes and jump, because you're never going to feel ready, but if you never take the leap, you might regret it one day. And that's it for today. Oh, that's it for today, guys. I really had a blast doing this episode. I know I say that in every episode, but I truly, truly love doing this week after week. I love talking to artists and picking their brains and just learning how everyone got to the point they are right now. So if you've been enjoying these talks as much as I have, come on, you need to subscribe to me already. What are you doing? Whatever podcast app you're using right now, hit that subscribe button. Have my episodes downloaded automatically for you week after week. It really helps me out. And if you want to show a little extra appreciation, and guys, I really appreciate these and I read every single one of them, leave a review. That is even more helpful because it helps the podcast get found by more people, which means I can share these stories with more people and we can all grow as artists together. And wouldn't that be awesome? And if you're wanting to follow the happenings of the podcast, hearing like updates and just seeing the funny memes that I post about artists, follow me on Instagram at The Art Journey Pod. And if you want to see detailed show notes besides here in the app, if you want them all easily accessible and in one place, you can go to the website, which is theartjourneypodcast.com. And if you want to see little old me and my art, you can follow my art Instagram, which is at Alex Agosto. That's spelled ALEKSAGOSTO. And I also have a website under the same name, alexagosto.com. So I hope you guys had a blast today with me. And I hope you guys are also out there hustling and making your dreams come true day after day, little by little, step by step. Because January is a great time for new beginnings, but even if you're listening to this in the middle of July, what better time to start than right now, right? So until next week, guys, this is me signing off, and I will see you next week. Bye.